What's up, y'all? This is FSGM once again. Today I will be discussing my thoughts on the NFL draft for the Seattle Seahawks. For starters, I always base my thoughts and my opinions on the Seahawks draft or any of my team's drafts, especially in the NBA and NFL, since obviously it's a lot easier to pay attention to the draft prospects. But I always base my draft grades and once again my thoughts on the process, on a player's positional fit, meaning height and weight. Like, do their attributes fit a certain position, right? So, because for me to say, hey, I would want the Seahawks to draft this guy or that guy. Trust me, there are a few players out there every year that I would like to have them draft. But to say that I know every single player and so on and so forth, that would be a total lie on my part. So as I just said one last time, to be repetitive, is I will base my draft grade or my thoughts on the Seahawks draft based on a player's positional fit, height, weight, and etc. Let me see my to-do list real quick because I made a note. Yeah, so like I said, so there's that part of it is I base it on the attributes and so on and so forth. For the Seahawks, look, they obviously traded Russell Wilson, and that's how they have all this draft capital, or especially in a top, now a top 10 pick. But before this, we really didn't have much. I'll say it this way. For starters, is I posted probably a month or so ago, maybe even 2 months ago, or probably a month ago, about it was a blog post about how all eyes are on the Seahawks scouting department, and believe me, that's going to be the case, given John Schneider's and Pete Carroll's guts to trade Russell Wilson. Well, guess what? The pressure now falls on their scouting department and John, obviously John and Pete, but really the scouting department, because let's be honest, I understand once teams, you make the playoffs constantly over and over and over, you're drafting later in the round, especially in the first round, and I understand that, but their draft classes have been a little lean, especially I believe. I don't remember the exact year. It's in my blog post. But the Malik McDowell draft pick really, honestly, really screwed up the whole process for the Seahawks. I mean, if you go back and look at that thing, that one draft pick there was a ripple effect, all because of one dude's decision to do stupid stuff. Anyways, so as I said in my blog post, the pressure's on, and so I'm really interested to see if they're able to, as a front office, to really nail this. Because let's be honest, if they can, and I think they will, but if they can nail this thing, or this draft class, they're not as far away from contending as people think. I don't think they're that far away, especially if they can really nail this draft class. They still have some really good talent on this team, obviously, and I love the acquisition of Noah Fant. That was a great pickup for them. And with they also have Will Dissly. And just on a side note, they've tried for years. The Seahawks have tried to do the double tight end set. They added Ed Dixon a few years back, and he just couldn't stay healthy. But they've been dying for the double tight end set, and for that type of impact or that type of playmaking from the tight end position. So anyways, with this draft class, really, like I said, because I believe that they're really not that far away, they need to draft the best player available. That's kind of where they're at. Not only that, as far as drafting the best player available, but this is kind of another, or not another Captain Obvious, but it will. They need playmakers. If you look at the team the last couple of years, especially on the defensive side of the ball, what does Pete always say? It's always about the ball, right? Well, the Seahawks over the last few years on defense, they haven't created the turnovers. They haven't had the impact plays that we've all come accustomed to, especially when we were competing for Super Bowls. So yeah, they need playmakers, and I know it was a tough decision to get rid of Bobby Wagner, and I understand that he had great tackle numbers and all that, but he sideline to sideline, he just wasn't the same guy, and he wasn't creating those game changing plays that he was earlier in his career, and that can be true for anybody, but for anybody that was disappointed about the Bobby Wagner thing. It wasn't really that big of a surprise given that his cap hit and his lack of impact plays. Now, him as a person, obviously, we all love Bobby. He's going to be in the Ring of Honor, but I just thought I let that be known that, the Seahawks are, to be blunt here, they're not stupid. As the old San Francisco Giants GM said once, Brian Sabian, when he traded Matt Williams, he said, "You guys, I'm not an idiot." And guess what? He wasn't. He got Jeff Kent and other players in that Matt Williams trade. And I just want to let people know that, hey, John Schneider and Pete Carroll, they're not idiots, okay? So it was tough to give up Bobby, and it was tough to move on from Russell Wilson. But I believe it was the right decision. And I will dive deeper into the Russell Wilson thing later on in the offseason. So let's see. Draft needs. Like I said, it's really about the best player available. But on my phone notes here, let's see. Cornerback, D-line, O-line, quarterback, running. Okay. So really getting back to my playmaker comment, the Seahawks need to improve their cornerback position. I mean, they need another impact lockdown corner. I love the pick of Brown last year in the 5th round from Oklahoma. That's worked out really well. And I love the addition of bringing back Justin Coleman. I believe he might have been somewhere else, but I think he was in Detroit. Anyways, he was the old slot corner for the Seahawks, and I thought that was another solid move. And I still have high hopes for Sidney Jones. I still think, give him another year in our system. I think he can be solid, but they really need one or two really legit lockdown corners in this draft, and that's why I'm interested to see what they do at 9. But I'll dive into pick number 9 for them for the Seahawks in a moment. But they need a lockdown corner to really help out that defense and to create more havoc. As far as once again, playmaking ability. They need another lockdown corner. Let's see. And then, every year you just say O-line, D-line for every team. Every team in the NFL, every year it's what's the draft need? You just say O-line, D-line every single year. Offensive line, defensive line, every single year. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how deep you are. You can never have enough of those guys. As far as the offensive line goes, John Schneider always says, "Hey, this thing's a puzzle," and given the salary cap, and all that kind of stuff, you got to make tough choices, and whether it was right or not, they kind of went cheap on the offensive line, as far as salary goes. But I also want to make it clear too that it wasn't for a lack of effort. All this talk about their O-line sucks, this and that, but it's not like they haven't tried to draft offensive linemen earlier in the drafts. Way back when they first started, they drafted James Carpenter and John Moffitt, right? I think it was John Moffitt. It's Moffitt, but I think it is John Moffitt. Anyways, they drafted those two guys back to back, I believe it was. And unfortunately, James was serviceable, right? He could go back and forth between guard and tackle, but really he was a guard. But and then way back when it was their first year, they drafted Russell Okung. So if you look at it, they have actually spent a lot of resources on the offensive line. It's just it just hasn't worked out. And look, that's all the NFL. If you really look at it, there's only a select few teams that really have legit offensive lines. A lot of it has to do with today's style of college football. It's really screwing up the offensive line growth or the offensive line, just the offensive line product. Today's college football, because it's basketball on grass, other than the traditional SEC schools, other than the SEC, the rest of us, we all just play basketball on grass, and it's really screwed up the growth of the offensive linemen. Um, so the Seahawks, we'll see what they do at 10. I know there's a lot of good corners, like I said, there's some really good ones, and there's some other offensive linemen. So we'll see what they do. And the same for defensive line. Once again, it's basically the same thing as I said for the offensive line. They without the offensive line and D line in today's NFL, you're not going to win. Okay, so they got to continue to keep adding to that position group. And again, there's some really good young talent in this draft, from what I understand. So we'll see. As far as the D line on their roster, I mean, they got Darrell Taylor. They added a kid. I think he's a Leo linebacker, D end, or what have you, from the Chargers, I believe it was. And then I also believe I took a quick look at their rosters today, although I don't really think it was updated, the Seahawks roster. But they also added a guy from Chicago, I believe it was. So there's some talent there still. But again, in order for the Seahawks to get back to where they want to be, they need to really rev up the D-line depth, right? Because if you look at possibly the Rams, even all the good teams, right, or even when we were in our heyday, so to speak, we would rotate guys constantly, right? And the Seahawks got to that point a little bit last year. When we were really humming, we would rotate guys in and out constantly, and the offensive lines from the opponent's side couldn't keep up because our guys were so fresh. It's really they need a lockdown corner. Continue to look at the O line and D lines, and then. And so another one I said was, and John Schneider brought this up after the Russell Wilson trade, and I'll dive into that just for a second. One of the biggest disappointments I have with John Schneider and Pete is that they haven't drafted or looked at, not looked at because you're always looking, but they haven't drafted guys to quarterback projects, I should say, right? They've never really drafted a quarterback project before, and that's really disappointing, given that John Schneider comes from Green Bay, and they're well known for drafting quarterbacks every single year. You're talking about I think it was Mark Brunell, all those guys down the line. I'm drawing a blank on them. Or Aaron Brooks. They would just constantly draft guys and build them up and then flip them for draft picks or other draft capital. And so that's probably been after this Russell Wilson thing. They really should have really really put more thought or really put some more draft capital into younger quarterbacks. And look, I can dive into it for a second. Any prima donna quarterback, like the Aaron Rodgers and Russell Wilsons, and by prima donna I mean that with respect. When you're that good, you have an ego and all that. Okay, I'm not saying it's a problem, but it can be. But when you're that guy, like an Aaron Rodgers or Russell Wilson and what have you, you need to stop whining about your team drafting guys younger than you, because look, everybody has a day and a day where they have to move on, right? It's happened. Look, it happened with Brett Favre in Green Bay, right? So I get really annoyed with veteran quarterbacks who get all bent out of shape when a team drafts a younger quarterback. It's like, well, what do you want us to do? If we don't do it, we're not ahead of the curve. And if you leave, like the Seahawks, well, guess what? Now they're kind of, we'll see what happens. But now, if they spent draft capital on younger quarterbacks a couple of years ago or 3-4 years ago, we would have been in a lot better shape. But that's neither here nor there at this point. But I'll be devastated or really frustrated if they don't start doing the Green Bay style of drafting a young quarterback every year, or or at least every other year to kind of start that process. So yeah, they need to start the drafting of a younger quarterback project. And like I said, the Seahawks really just, I know I mentioned this earlier, but they really just need playmakers. Forget the positions. They just need game-changing style of players. Like I said, the reason why they struggled on defense a little bit was that they just stopped making plays. So they really need to really improve their playmaking ability as a whole team or a whole roster. They really just need playmakers. So yeah, that's pretty much it as far as like traditional draft needs. I will buzz through the roster or the position groups with you guys and just give you my thoughts right now. So I delved into the quarterback. Obviously, they have Drew Lock, and look, I know he's kind of the punching bag right now, but I am really interested to see what happens with Drew Lock. That's one. But I also I did talk about this in my blog post a month ago or 2 months ago about Baker Mayfield. Look, there's no way. Look, you can say whatever you want about the Browns and all that, and there's no way that they would make the trade for Deshaun Watson without having behind the scenes conversations with the NFL and all that. So all this talk about, well, they could keep Baker and this and that. Oh, no, I don't see it. There's no way. My point is that, yes, Deshaun Watson could get suspended. That is possible. And yes, Baker Mayfield would be a nice fallback. But, like, it's already been written on the wall, right? So, everybody's kind of complaining at Baker Mayfield for the way he's handled it. I'm actually the other way. I think he's done all the, he's actually handled it pretty well. So my point is that I'm really interested to see if the Seahawks will go after Baker Mayfield. Given that we're like an hour away from the draft or what have you, would I give up the number 10 pick for him? No, I would not. I've been debating that for a couple months now, and no, I would not give up the number 10 pick for him. The Browns have kind of really messed it up for themselves because everybody's kind of already had they've already kind of put their quarterback puzzle together, and the same thing with the 49ers is that they kind of, both teams, the Browns and the Niners, kind of didn't strike when the iron was hot, and now they'll just take whatever they can get, or you just outright release them, but that wouldn't be a smart move to release Baker Mayfield because you get nothing back for him. So anyways, so that's the quarterback position. Is again, I want them to draft a quarterback this year as a project or what have you, and then we'll see what happens with Drew Lock. I'm optimistic, and then I expect them to acquire Baker Mayfield at some point. I really do. Okay, so that's the quarterback position. Running back position, obviously we have Rashad Penny, who actually, the guy we saw the last 4 or 5 games last year, that's the guy they wanted when they drafted him. That's what we expected, and it finally came to fruition last year. So I was really pleased that they were able to bring him back because another team offered him more money, but he said that Seattle is home. So I was really pleased that they were able to get him on a 1-year deal, and kind of another prove-it deal, if you will. Chris Carson, we'll see, right? He's got the neck issues or whatever he's got going on, and that's typical of Chris. So I wouldn't be surprised if they draft another running back, because, again, you can find those guys late. So, yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if they draft a running back. Wide receiver, look, that's probably one of their deepest positions, honestly. I mean, you got Tyler, you got DK, and oh, by the way, if they trade DK Metcalf, then it is a true rebuild. Okay, let's just put that out there. All this talk, I think a lot of it was the media, trying to strike up because they got rid of Russell Wilson. Oh, are they going to get rid of him? Or are they just going to do a true rebuild? If they do, obviously, to be repetitive, if they do get rid of DK, then yes, it is a true rebuild. But I don't think they will. I think they're just trying to adjust on the fly. And honestly, I will be ticked if they trade DK Metcalf. Because as I said at the very beginning of this thing, they're really not that far away from contending to where we want to be. Again, the wide receiving group is probably one of the deepest. You got DK, you still have Tyler, you got the Eskridge, and so again, you can get another wide receiver in the middle of the rounds or something. But if they get a higher echelon, say in the second round or something, that tells me that they really obviously really like that player, and he can be another true game breaker. Tight end, they're pretty much set, but again, it's always late round. You can always get him in the late rounds. I mean, you just acquired Noah Fant from the Broncos, who is a nice player, and like I said, that'll give them the opportunity to do the 2 tight end set that they've wanted to do for years. So they have Noah Fant, they got Will Dissly. The problem with Uncle Will is that he just doesn't stay healthy, right? So if he stays healthy, he's a hell of a blocker and he can catch the ball. And but he's got to stay healthy, and that was a pretty gutsy contract that the Seahawks gave him. I believe it was like 3 years at 24. Don't quote me on that, but it was in around that, and that was a pretty good chunk of change. The tight ends, and they got Parkinson's, I believe, the kid from Stanford. He came in banged up, but hopefully he'll be able to come back this year. So tight end, again, they're pretty much set, but again, to be repetitive, every single position you can always get later in the draft, right? Like in the late rounds. But traditionally, right now, they're pretty much set at tight end. So quarterback, running back, wide receiver, tight end. And again, we spoke about the O line, and we spoke about the D line already. Linebackers, that one's an interesting one for me, because they have Michael Brooks, who will probably play middle linebacker, right? And he's a stud. He's everything you would want in a linebacker, and he's got speed that kills. And you got Barton, and I'm really interested to see how Cody Barton responds this year. Because he's kind of been waiting in the wings, and he's been a standout special teamer. But I'm really interested to see if he can be, if Barton and Brooks can do a 1-2 punch, if you will. So they might. I looked at that today, but that's a position that they'll probably look at in the draft is adding a linebacker or two. Because BBK, he'll come back from injury, but he's really a special teamer. And the couple of guys, it's a little tricky right now. Like I said, I'm not really sure if they've updated their roster all the way. But like I said, they'll probably need to draft a couple linebackers or at least one. So linebacker. And then the secondary, we already talked about the corners. Safeties, they got all these, the safety-wise, they got a lot of talent. They got Blair, they got Diggs, they got Adams, and all that. So, really, it's if Blair can stay healthy, right? I mean, it was either last year or the year before, he tore his ACL, like, early in the year or whatever, and it really sucked because he had a great offseason. But if Blair can be Blair and really stay healthy, that's another true kind of game-changing type of player, kind of guy, because he likes to hit, even though the NFL doesn't like the big hits anymore and all that, or the jacked up stuff from ESPN, he still likes to lay the wood. So if he can stay healthy, that would be another great addition to the secondary. So that pretty much covers it for me. So I think that about covers it for my draft preview. So again, they need a kick-ass corner, and all that kind of stuff, and they just need playmakers. As I said, if they can really nail this draft, then we'll be right where we want to be. So I think I'm going to end it there, and I think even though this video will be uploaded here soon, and it's kind of a tight window, I'm still trying to figure out if I want to do a live video during the Seahawks pick. But given John Snyder's history of trading back, we'll see. But I'm probably gonna go live once they're on the clock. But anyways, like I said, this has been FSGM's draft preview for the Seahawks, and I'll be talking to you guys soon. Real quick, I will do a video, a recap of the draft, and I also will do a blog post recap of the draft shortly, shortly after or shortly next week after the draft is obviously completed. But like I said, this has been FSGM's NFL draft recap for the Seattle Seahawks. I'll be talking to you guys soon. Take care.